You're okay. You can stay here with me if you want. Yeah. Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Santi, and I joined Cisco 8 years ago. I've been working as a CCIE exam program manager. I used to manage the CCIE wireless exam, and now I manage the CCIE enterprise infrastructure exam. And over the over the last 8 years, there are a couple of things that I've done that I think have given me some insights into the sort of things that candidates sometimes do during the exam, and sometimes they don't do during the exam. Okay. One of those things that I've done is that I have graded many CCIE wireless exams, and that has given me again some understanding of the sometimes simple mistakes that candidates do when they configure the task during the exam. And the other thing that I've done is that I have also proctored the CCIE mobile lab in London many times. And that again has given me some understanding of the type of questions that the candidates ask the proctor on the day of the exam, and also the interaction that goes on between the proctor and the candidate on the day of the exam. So one thing to know about me, I'm a big Lego fan. So when I'm not doing any CCIE related stuff, I usually I'm in my office building Lego, either with my son or my daughter, who are also big Lego fans. So the objective of the session really is very simple. It's just simply to guide you and to share with you that information, those things that I notice as I grade the exams, and when I when I grade the exams, and when I've been proctoring as well on the day that the candidates have the exam. So the first thing that I would like to talk about is the speed. And the speed, I think, is the main thing that candidates understand, that when you come to the CCIE exam, you have to be fast, okay? Because the topology that you're going to be facing is a big topology. There are lots of devices, and you're going to be configuring lots of devices. So what I think that happens sometimes is that candidates don't think about speed in many different ways. The only thing that they think about is just the speed in the terms of typing really fast. So when it comes to preparing for the exam, what most candidates do is, they set up a home lab, but sometimes what happens there is that you are not able to set up all the devices that are in the hardware list in your home lab. And then what happens there is that you create a sort of a gap in your speed process, right, when you are going to configure the exam, because you don't have all the devices that are in the hardware list, okay? So what you need to do, or my advice would be to then you can set up. So when you're preparing for the exam, you can set up. What you have to do is to set up all the devices that you can in your home lab, yeah. And any gaps, for example, when I was preparing for my exam, any gaps, what I did is I used third-party vendor racks to prepare for any devices that I didn't have in my home rack, okay? So that is one thing that you can do when it comes to your preparation. The other thing that you can do when it comes to your preparation, if you have any devices that you don't have in your home lab, is that you can go and use things that Cisco now has in place, things like CML, Cisco Cloud, and also the CCIE practice labs. Now, the other thing I think that candidates don't think about when they come to the exam is the lab environment. And the lab environment is important because you have to think that speed and efficiency going together. So when it comes to the lab environment, you need to be used to use the lab environment. And the way you can do that as well is you can use the CCIE practice labs, because the CCIE practice labs use exactly the same front end that you use when you are going to be taking the exam on the day of the exam. The other thing that you can use to prepare for the lab environment and to become used to the lab environment is that you can go and watch the deep dive that our friend Bruno put together 3 years ago. And that is a great resource as well for you to get used to the lab environment before you come into the lab itself. Now, the last thing I would like to share with you about getting the speed before you come to the day of the exam is the alias command. And the alias command, I don't know if you're familiar with the alias command, is simply you are going to abbreviate a full command into maybe 2 or 3 letters. And the reason why I like the alias command is because it allows you to, to gain speed and also avoid typos. In the day of the exam, you're going to be probably not be typing as sharp as when you are practicing, and you want to avoid doing typos. As I said, the alias command is not something that everyone is going to be using. It's a bit personal if you want to use the alias command or not. But if you decide that you want to use the alias command, then you have to make the alias command something that you use during your preparation as well. Okay, you cannot just come to the lab exam on the day and decide that you are going to use the alias command. It's something that you need to make second hand and use during your preparation as well. So the next thing I will talk about is what I call your CCIE superpowers. And obviously, knowledge is something that is given when you come to the exam. You have to have the knowledge. You need to know the blueprint. And speed is something we just talked about. But the other thing that I think candidates forget about sometimes when they come to the exam is precision. Okay. The problem with this is that you can have knowledge and you can have speed, but if you don't have precision, then you're going to be losing points during the exam. And now what I'm going to do is just going to simply show you some examples in which you can see that the candidate, when he came to the lab, he had the knowledge, he had the speed, but because he didn't have the precision, he was not able to get the points in the exam. Okay, so these examples are actually taken from the actual CCIE wireless exam. And as you can see there, the task here is simply to configure the host name of the access point. So from a configuration point of view and from a knowledge point of view, really, to configure a host name is something that everyone who comes to the exam is going to be able to use. Is going to be able to do, because it really doesn't get any more simpler than that. Okay, that to configure the host name. The problem here is, as you can see, the candidate made a typo when configuring the host name, and then what is going to happen is that when the verification comes, the gradient script is going to come and it's going to try to retrieve that information from the access point, retrieve the configuration, and it's not going to be able to do so because that host name doesn't match what the gradient script is expecting. So it is very important that if you get, any task in the exam and you get a table and you get an IP address and you get a host name, it is important that you follow whichever host name, IP address, or information you get on the task itself. Now, the next one is the same example, so it's the same task, but as you can see here, the candidate here, for some reason, decided to come up with their own naming convention, right? You can see there, I've made this slide slightly bigger, so you can go and read the task. This is the actual task that you get on the CCIE wireless exam, and the task says basically, the AP name must match exactly the AP name given in the table below. And you have the exactly in italic, you have in the table below in bold, you have the whole thing underlined, so there is really no mistake as to what you have to do. And the table itself, I think you could all agree as well that the table itself is very clear as to what host names you have to use, right? But as I said, for whichever reason, the candidate decided to use his own naming convention. And then here what's going to happen is exactly the same, okay? The gradient script is going to run, and then it's going to fail to find those access points because the host name is different. And in this case, actually, I can tell you that what the candidate did was he configured all the access points in the rack using this naming convention. And then, of course, you can imagine in the CCIE wireless, if the gradient script cannot retrieve any configuration from the access points, you are straight away going to fail the exam pretty much. So it is important that you pay attention to the precision. It is important that you pay attention to whatever the task is telling you to do. Okay, so this is a different example of in which the candidate has to do something a bit different. The candidate has to go basically to configure, to make sure that the access points are working on the 2.4 gigahertz band. And in here as well is a clear example that you can tell, the candidate knew how to configure this, because on the top table, on the top output, you can see that the radios are up, and when you go to the button controller is where you see the problem that the radio is done. And here the task is also very simple. It's simply that you have to make sure that the access points are working on the 2.4 gigahertz band. So again, not a very complicated task to do, and something that you should be able to achieve by simply copying and pasting from one controller to the other. But again, the candidate is going probably too fast, is using this too much speed going through the exam, and is failing to copy and paste from one controller to the other, the configuration. Now here is going to be the same problem when the gradient script is going to run. Probably what is going to happen is that the gradient script is going to call the wireless client PC that we have in the wireless expert exam, and ask the client PC to connect to an SSID through that specific access point. And of course, because this access point is down, the client PC is not going to be able to connect. So again, these are all sort of clear tasks where you can see that the candidate have the knowledge because he configured part of the configuration correct, but then because he forgot to copy and paste, he's gonna not get the points in this particular task. Okay, the other thing that I see candidates failing to do is to have a plan. And having a plan is something that is very important when you come to the CCIE exam, especially if it is not your first attempt. I think that if it is your first attempt, you can be a bit more forgiven to not have a plan, because the lab is going to be new to you, and then the stress levels are always higher on the first attempt, right? But if it's your second attempt or subsequent attempt, it is important that you come to the exam with a plan. And the plan doesn't have to be something overcomplicated and with lots of detail. When I did my third attempt, my plan was something as simple as by the time the lunch break comes, I had to have finished the first 2 sections of the exam, okay? Even more, my plan was also that whatever happened during the exam, when I came back from lunch, I will carry on, I will start the section 3 of the exam. And this is, again, something that I see candidates doing during the exam when I'm proctoring. What happens is that you get to a point where you get stuck with a question. And then what happens there is that your engineering mind kicks in, and you want to solve that problem, you want to understand what's going on with that problem, and you don't move forward to the next question, right? And you have to learn to sacrifice points, okay? You have to learn to leave some points behind and move on. Well, you have to understand that at the end of the day, you are on an exam environment, and the end game for you there is to pass the exam. It's not to to solve every single question, to solve every single problem, to get every single point. You don't need to get every single point. You just need to get enough points to pass the exam. Another thing that needs to be part of your plan, and it must be part of your plan, is that you leave at least half an hour at the end to check your configurations. Okay, on the exam, you're going to have questions that are going to be interdependent. And as you go through the exam, what's going to happen is that quite likely you're going to be breaking tasks that you configure at the beginning of the exam. And if you don't leave enough time at the end to do some configuration checks, then quite likely you're going to lose points even without realizing, okay? Because you made those, you weren't able to fix something that you broke 3 hours before and you didn't realize. So it is very important that you have a plan, you stick to the plan, and that you leave time at the end to do the verification. That is extremely important, okay? Okay, interacting with proctors. Interacting with proctors, for me, goes back to that sort of speed and efficiency, because what I think that happens sometimes is that candidates don't fully understand the relationship between the proctor and the candidate. And just to be clear, the main reason, one, of course, the proctors are there on the day is to stop people from cheating, right? But the other reason why they're there is to help you out if there is a problem with the equipment in your rack. Now, what happens sometimes is that what I see happening is that the people, the candidates still start calling the proctor every 2 minutes, and they want the attention of the proctor, they want the proctor to come to help. Now, you have to understand that the proctor is not there to solve the task of your exam for you. That is for you to do. So don't try to get information from the proctors to resolve the questions. That is not going to happen. The other thing that you cannot do is to keep asking the proctors to add time to your exam. And that, believe me, also happens a lot. It comes to the end of the exam and people start asking you, oh, can you add 5 minutes? Can you add 10 minutes? Time management is something you need to manage during the exam. It's another sort of what I will call your an extra CCIE power that you need to use, and you need to be able to manage the time yourself, okay? Now, saying all that, there are times, of course, where you are going to have to call the proctor, and the proctor is going to come and hopefully resolve the problems for you. But as I said, what is important is that you don't call the proctor every 2 minutes, and if you think there is a problem with your rack, spend maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes trying to make sure that there is a problem with your rack. And what I say this, because what you also have to understand is that if you are contacting the proctor, what you're going to have to do is, quite likely, you're going to have to go to the desk where the proctor is seated. Then you're going to have to come back to your own desk. Then you're going to have to show the proctor whichever problem you think you have. Then the proctor is going to have to work out if there is a problem or not. And the only thing that is not stopping while everything, all of that is happening is the time, okay? So that is not an efficient way of dealing with your time. Another thing there, that one comment at the bottom, I actually have a candidate who, in London, who came to the exam, and at some point of the exam asked me, call me over. I went over, and his problem was that he wasn't happy with the brightness of his screen. Okay, honestly, if you cannot sort out the brightness of your screen yourself, and you need to call the proctor for that, maybe you are actually in the wrong career. I don't think that you're going to be able to pass the CCIE exam. So again, just manage your time and your sort of interaction with the proctor in a way that is efficient and that it makes sense. Okay, so the other thing I see happening as a proctor is that people come to the exam very stressed. And the stress levels are always high, okay, of course, and especially if it's your first attempt. But I think that sometimes people and candidates are stressed, not just because of the exam itself, but because all this conversation and all these myths that people can read on the internet about the exam itself, okay? So what I would like to do is to go through some of these myths, and actually some of them are actual questions that people have asked me while I was proctoring, to try and sort of take that sort of doubts about all these questions from you when you go and take the exam. So the first one is that the proctor will break your config during lunch. And this one actually, for me, is very funny, because what actually happens when you take the exam is that when it comes to lunch break, you all go as a group. So you all go to the elevator as a group, to the lift as a group. You all go to the restaurant, to the canteen as a group, and sit on one table as a group, and then you all come down back as a group. So I don't understand how can someone say that the proctor somehow, while you are having lunch with him in front of you, the proctor is going to break your rack during lunch, and everyone's rack. That is not the case, okay? The other one is that the exams are graded by scripts only, and that we don't care about what happens with the grading. And once the grading script runs, that's it. We don't care. That again is not true. Yes, we do use grading scripts to grade exams, but what happens as well that every single candidate, every single exam has a proctor assigned to it. And what the proctor does is basically they go through every single question, every single item that the grading script has marked as fail. He's going to verify that indeed that is a fail item, okay? So the other thing that happens during the grading is the grading is going to collect all the outputs, all the configurations needed to verify the questions. So then the proctor very easily can compare, what it was collected from your configuration, because he's going to have that on one screen, and then he's going to have on the other screen the expected output for you to get the points for that specific item. The next one is that the proctor didn't lie me. That is the sort of the, it wasn't my fault. I failed the exam because the proctor didn't lie me. That again is not true, and it's not true simply because the proctor that you have on the day is not the proctor that's going to grade your exam, okay? So the proctor that you have on the day, you can imagine you've been there for 8-9 hours with that proctor. That guy actually also has a family. When the exam is finished, he goes home as well. And what happens then, that is a different proctor in a different location, in a different time zone, is going to come online, and it is that proctor that is then going to grade your exam. For example, if you're in Brussels, it's probably going to be someone in the US, in San Jose or in Richardson, that is going to grade your exam. The other one is that it is easier to pass the exam in certain locations. That again, I don't know how these things comes about, but again, it's not true. The CCIE team, we tried, to have consistency across all the locations, and that is not just the consistency of the hardware, of the monitor, of the keyboard. It's also the consistency of the content itself. So whichever exams we have available, those exams are going to be available across all the locations. So no matter where you go, you should have the sort of same experience. The next one is that it is easier, you don't have access to the GUI during the exam because it's Cisco and it's all CLI, okay? This actually was very popular when I was preparing for my exam. And some of them went even further, saying that if you configure the questions through the GUI, you wouldn't get the points because you were only allowed to use the CLI. Okay, so this one is, again, not true, but I'm going to caveat in the sense that it could be that when you get into the exam, there is no underlying network connectivity, or there is a problem with the network connectivity. And of course, if there is a problem with the network connectivity, you need to fix that problem. And then once you fix that problem and there is connectivity between the devices in your network, you will be able to access the GUI. And of course, if you want to use the GUI to configure the devices, you are free to do so. The next one is that there is only one right way to answer each question. That, again, I'm going to sort of caveat because, again, this goes back to what we were talking before about precision and reading the question very carefully. If the task itself doesn't have any constraints, any requirements that are sort of forcing you to configure the task in a specific way, then yes, you are free to configure that item in whichever way you want. And if there are no specific requirements, as I said, and you configure the item in whichever way you want, then the way we grade that particular question, it will be based on functionality, not actually looking for a specific command. The last one there is that the CCIE is a best practices exam. That, again, is one that you have to be careful because that, again, is not true. The CCIE is an expert level exam, and you have to, you have to know the best practices, but you also have to know the corner cases scenarios. So you cannot expect to come to the exam and just, after reading the CBD, and expect to pass the exam. Okay, so the last point that I wanted to talk about is what to do when the exam is finished. And this, again, comes from my experience as a proctor, where I see a lot of people do, or most people do, when they finish the exam, is they grab their phone and then they phone their husbands, their wives, their boss, whoever, and then they spend the next 2-3 hours talking on the phone. And now my advice here is not to do that, and not to do that for a simple reason. When you come out of the exam, you don't really know if you're going to pass or if you're going to fail. And even if you think that you're going to pass, as we have seen during the slides, there could be things that you've forgotten to do. You forgot to copy and paste the configuration across multiple devices, or you did some typos. You weren't able to verify the configurations at the end because you didn't leave any time. So there could be reasons why you are going to be losing points even without realizing. So for this reason, what I would advise you to do is, to go and find a quiet place, sit down, and start to think about everything that happened to you during the exam. And what I mean by that is make notes of the questions, make notes of your answers, your configurations, anything that you suddenly remember. Oh, I forgot to do this bit in this particular part of the network. Make notes of all that. Your plan, did your plan work? Did your plan didn't work? What could you change? I took the exam 3 times, and every time I took the exam, I learned something new, and I was able to fine-tune my plan for the next attempt. And I'll be very honest, all that information that you can gather, when you come out of the exam and you sit down and you make all these notes, all that information is the best information and the best tool that you're going to have when you come and do your second attempt or your third attempt, whichever. Now, of course, I will say, when you're in the exam, you are under NDA, so please do not share any information that you have about the exam with anyone. If you are caught sharing information, there are big penalties for you as an individual in relation to your certifications with Cisco. So please be very careful not to do that. Okay. That really is the end of the presentation, the end of the session. Sorry, one thing. If you look underneath your seats, one of you is going to have one of these.